To give context, I'm a 25-year-old male. I started a job at a company that makes lenses for glasses, and immediately I was introduced to Nate, an awkward guy around my age that seemed like he had good intentions. He was nice enough, but I figured that most people humored him when it came to talking to him. I was convinced that he was on the spectrum in the realm of Asperger's. I've had friends in the past who have Asperger's, and I didn't really mind. Besides, we seemed to like the same things, including Dungeons & Dragons. My D&D group was small, and we wanted more people, and knowing that he was into D&D, I invited him to come join. My now wife, then fiancé, immediately grew uncomfortable when he came into her home to make his character. And when it came to actually playing sessions, another girl at our table also expressed that she was uncomfortable. I didn't feel great about it, so after 3 to 4 sessions, we kicked him out and continued playing. But I still had to see him at work, which led him to always acting sad around me, but I wasn't going to give in. Eventually, I kept telling him that I was starting another group, and he could join that one, yada yada yada. His pity party was starting to annoy me, so I said whatever to keep him at bay. One day at work, he had the day off, and the following weekend. Not me or my coworkers saw this as strange, but then, when Monday came, he still didn't show up. Tuesday, no show. This was very unlike him, because he was practically a teacher's pet. Soon, one of my coworkers was moving around the warehouse with a phone in her hand, stopping people and sharing the news. Nate had been arrested in North Dakota as he attempted to meet an underage girl for sex. We were all in disbelief, because that's the first feeling that hits you. You don't want to believe someone like that could live in your town, lest work right beside you. Indeed, he was in contact with a minor over the internet and set up a meeting at a park with the intention of having sex. The police were tipped off as a teacher just happened to see the messages on the girl's phone. I nearly puked when I heard the news. He was in my home and made comments about my kids being so cute, especially my daughter, which definitely made me more sick. He would talk to me sometimes about wanting a girlfriend and how he was just waiting for the right one to come along, someone in his church group. And now it scares me to think about how old this girl was. One of my friends at work mentioned how he went to install a washer and dryer at Nate's house, and when looking around, he was yelled at by Nate not to go upstairs. Not in a, "Oh, that's my room and I'd prefer no one go up there" type of vibe. More like, "There's something up there that I don't want you to see" type of vibe. He was arrested and put in prison, like I said, and remains there to this day, as far as I'm concerned. Just goes to show you can't really know everybody, and that's what is truly scary. When I was growing up, my family became close to a very wealthy middle-aged man, who was also close with some other kids' families at my school. I think I was about 7 when I met him. It was a repeated pattern that he would get close with kids' parents, then get close with the kids, hyper-focus on them, have a falling out with the parents, and then move on to the next family. This may sound dangerous, but nothing ever untoward happened, to my knowledge, and I was one of the children he got closest to. I think he was just an emotionally immature man-child who could relate better to children. Still creepy though, which is why I'm posting it here. My family went through the same cycle with him. I got really close to him, more so even than my sister and my friends, whose parents were also friends with him. Looking back, it was really unwise and completely inappropriate, and my parents have admitted that it was and apologized. But I was just allowed to sleep over at his house by myself, or just with a couple of friends. Why a grown man would agree or want to hang out with a 7-year-old girl is also beyond me. Eventually, this man's erratic behavior drove my parents and me away. I think the final straw was when he yelled at my mother for wanting to spend the holidays with family instead of him. While all of this alone is creepy enough, the alarming behavior continued after the falling out. For several years afterwards, on holidays and my birthday, presents would be left at our doorstep for me. One year for my birthday, he got a very expensive piece of equipment and had my name painted onto it. Luckily, it stopped after about 3 years, but it was still very creepy. A few years later, my mom saw him with another family and with a young girl on his shoulders. It seems that behavior continued. While I was in college, my dad came down to help me move into a new apartment complex. The new place was about 5 stories high, and each level had an identical layout with apartment units along the indoor hallways, which were accessed from an elevator to the partaking garage below. I was the last one of my 3 roommates to move into the new place, so there was already some furniture and decor with which I was not familiar. This is relevant, I swear. Dad and I were unloading the truck from the garage below, so we would take the elevator to my place on the 5th floor with each load. As we carried my big mattress into the apartment, I had to set it down for a moment to readjust my grip before we went through the door to my new bedroom. That's when I actually looked at my surroundings and thought, I don't recognize that couch. And where did that half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the counter come from? Right then, I also remembered that no one else was home, but I could hear the shower turning off, and a man's voice timidly said, "Hello?" from the bathroom. As it dawned on us both that we were in the wrong unit, and my dad just shouts, "Abort! Abort!" grabs his end of the mattress, and shoves me and the bed back out into the common hallway. We realized we had gotten off on the wrong floor of the elevator and had gone into the unit directly below mine. Luckily, we made it back to my floor before the poor guy from the shower ever saw us. Fast forward a couple months, and I had kind of forgotten about this whole event. One of my roommates had gotten to know the guys in the unit below us, and they would sometimes come up to our place to smoke her weed. One night, we were all hanging out in the living room with Andrew, one of the downstairs dudes, and it came up in conversation that we liked the great security in our building because this was a bigger city than any of us were used to. Andrew agreed, in general, but then he told us about this one time he totally freaked out because he was in the shower and he swears he heard multiple people in his apartment thumping around and talking to each other right outside the bathroom door. He had always wondered if he hallucinated the whole thing because when he emerged from the bathroom, nothing was stolen and nobody was there. At that point, I was trying to blend into the terrible 1980s wallpaper as my face turned bright red. My roommates all knew and loved the story of my dad and I breaking into the downstairs neighbor's apartment and then running away like total creeps. Of course, one of the girls doesn't miss a beat and says, "Oh yeah, but that was just cephalogeek and her dad trying to move her mattress in your bedroom." After I explained the whole situation, Andrew said that he was ultimately relieved to learn it wasn't someone with malicious intent, but I never was able to shake my new nickname, Creeper G. So there's my story about how my dad and I were inadvertently the local sketchballs. So this happened about 20 years ago, when I was a young 15-year-old girl. I had an older neighbor who taught drums and was a friend of my family's, and I would take drum lessons from him once a week. He only lived like 2.5 blocks away, so I would always walk, and he and his family lived at the end of a cul-de-sac. Well, one summery day, when I was walking home at like 4 p.m., broad daylight in a quiet neighborhood, there was a strange man standing across from the end of the cul-de-sac. He had on a big cowboy hat, odd for my area, and some facial hair. I don't know, he was maybe in his 30s, and he was just staring at me. He was watching me unabashedly as I walked down the cul-de-sac and crossed the street, and once my back was to him, I could hear that he was following me. My heart sped up. My drumstick seemed like a weak protection, and I was wearing these thin little flip-flops, and remember thinking if I had to kick them, they weren't going to help me at all. Less than half a block away from me was a more busy street, and I remember thinking if I could just get to the street where people would see, he'd be sure to back off. But his steps sounded closer, and I could taste my panic, knowing I wasn't going to make it. I ended up running up a house where I kind of knew the family, and I knew the mom with young kids was probably there, and pounded on her door, tried to open it myself even, in my panic. She opened it and spilled into her house and locked the door. I told her what had happened, and I let my heart calm down a little. After being inside for like 15 minutes, I asked if I could just hop her back fence to go home, since it would cut out a block of travel. But when we slid back the drapes of her back door, the dude was leaning against the fence, right outside her house, where he could see both the front and back door. She ended up loading her kids in the car and driving me home, and later had her husband ask around. Turned out, the dude was living with his mother and had just gotten out of jail. I don't know the charges. All I know is that my stomach has been twisted in knots, and it was the first time I'd tasted fear like that. I don't know what would have happened if he caught me.